So my name is Peter Macfadyen, and I'm the Mayor of Frome. And actually this afternoon I probably ought to put in this sort of rider, the sort of small print is that I'm not representing Frome, because I'm actually meant to when I'm being the Mayor, but I'm not really representing Frome, I'm representing me this afternoon, because some of the things I want to say are probably not shared by the entire population of 27,000. I'm wearing one of my 20 mayoral chains. This one's made of 100% crisp packets. So I've done this not to take a piss out of the role, which actually I take very seriously, but to try and break down some of the sort of things that happen around politics at all sorts of levels that make it detached. So I've got a very fine collection of chains, and this is one of my finest ones. It's also nice and light to bring to London. Anyway, I'm going to do two things this afternoon. The first is to tell you something you already know, and then to tell you a little story about what we've done as a way to try and get around that. And I've just heard the same thing that I want to say said very, very well upstairs by a woman who was talking about people's palaces. I think it was people's fun palaces, who was great and made me feel very, very nervous because she was very good and she didn't use any notes. But basically, what she said is the same thing that I want to say, is that, as a beginning, that the so-called democracy in which we live is absolutely not fit for purpose. It's dysfunctional, it's completely fucked. And if you haven't worked that out by this stage of the day, or worked it out anyway, then, I don't know quite where we are. And I suppose I knew that already, but I've realised it even more over the last 4 years of being a town councillor and then the mayor. At the top of the democratic pyramid is this bunch of squabbling schoolboys who are completely disengaged from reality. So that less than 1% mostly have no idea what the more than 99% have going on. And I'm not sure it's entirely their fault. I think it's the fault of the system. In Frome, we're about to replace a retiring MP called David we've got our choice, really. We have to choose between three men who are all called David. And they all offer various versions of austerity. And then there's also a green non-David on the left and a right non-David. There's a UKIP non-David as well. But essentially, neither of those stand any chance at all of being elected. So we've got the choice of the three Davids to replace the David. And watching them rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic is an enormous turn-off for anyone who can be bothered to vote. So in Frome, it's a town council. We've also got two layers above us, a district and a county. And these interim layers are busy struggling with budget reductions particularly, and they've got no capacity to really make contact at a grassroots level either. They meet in remote and distant places, and they too have really no connection. So depressing as this is, in reality for people like me, what happens at the top matters less and less, because as the screws of austerity tighten, I think we're never going to return to a position where we have the same money as we once did. It's never going to come down from above. And even if it did, actually I'm with Naomi Klein on this, that capitalism's a broken model. And so we'll never be in a position where we're going to get back to growth, which for me means, in my role as a town councillor, means that we've got to do it ourselves. And so what interests me around democracy is not what happens in terms of which leader we elect at a national level, but how we make democracy work better at a local level. Because my contention is that if the base of the pyramid isn't solid, then the layers higher up can't function. Because for democracy to work, it has to be built from the masses. So at the community level, people will only engage, I think, if they can really see that what they do makes a difference. And that's what we've tried to do in Frome, which is what I'm now going to tell you about. It's great, this. You can all see this clock. So you're all sitting there going, he's going on too long there, he's going to get in real trouble. I've got no idea what time it is. Anyway, I get told when I'm running too late. I hope I won't. So that's my sort of, what I think's going on. And now I want to tell you this bit of story, if you like. And if I run out of time, I wrote all this up in Flatpack Democracy, which is, I put some copies out on the bookstall outside. And basically, if you want to persuade the guy out there that you're going to do revolution with it, he'll give them to you, and otherwise he'll sell them to you. So you can, if you want. And that's got the full story, because obviously in the next 10 minutes I haven't got time to tell you this. And you can also get them off the blog that I write under the same name. So 4 years ago, a group of us came together in a pub. as people do, and moaned about a detached town council that actually wasn't overtly corrupt, it just missed opportunities. And we decided to shake things up. So a few months after that, 75% more people voted in Frome than the previous election, and half of the votes were cast for independence, which gave us 10 seats out of 17. So we had an outright majority in the town, and what's more, those that were left, the politicians that were left, hated each other more than they hated us. So actually, they continued to spend their lives bickering with each other, and have done really. So we've been able to do what we've wanted for the last 4 years. And we were a group of people who'd never done politics before. We ranged in age from sort of 21, I think he was at the time. My predecessor as mayor was mayor at 22, and through to a bit older and a bit more experienced. But none of us had been councillors in a town council. Part of the reason why I'm standing here rather nervously is when I'm not being the mayor of Frome, I'm an undertaker, and as an undertaker, you don't stand in front of this number of people. So we're not natural politicians in that sense. But what we do have in common is a desire to do things for Frome. So right from the very beginning, we dissolved all the existing committees, and we rebuilt an ambitious, forward-looking council that I think's played a really key role in bringing a buzz to Frome that wasn't there before. We've revamped public buildings, demolished allotment waiting times, and we've massively supported the voluntary sector. Right from the beginning, we put 20% of the sort of disposable bit of our budget into the groups and organisations that we felt were going to get hit as funding, as I said before, stopped coming down from above. So we made that way, way more in money than other local area councils, and then we gave far more of it out in those ways. And also helped by providing assistance with fundraising, which means we've brought in about 1.5 million over the 4 years has come into the town through fundraising, primarily through the voluntary sector and through local philanthropists. Basically, our approach to austerity has been Greek. It's not for us. And we felt that we needed to sort of drive our way out of a recession and austerity by getting positive vibes up and by just doing stuff, which is what we've done. So what was the key to taking power? I would say that at the heart of the dysfunctionality of the previous council, and most councils at this level, or many councils at this level in Britain, is party politics. Constant bickering, distracting and draining councillors and staff, and turning away anyone in the town who might want to get involved. Sort of mirrored what happens in Westminster, but on a smaller, although actually sometimes oddly a more personal scale, because we all live in a fairly small town. And as I said before, even now people, will continue that. So we'll get people, well, most notably when someone said, I don't understand this, but I'm voting against it on principle. It's just crackers. So I'm convinced that at this level, party politics is toxic, and that what people want is discussion and decision-making about the things that matter in their community that are not linked to ideology that's coming remotely from higher up. And I mean, from the talks and people I've seen before, this is not a theme that we've invented. That's something which you feels like one's hearing again and again and again. But the point about this, in a way, if you're trying to do this, is that the history of independence is not a happy one in Britain. Most people get into independent politics because they've been thrown out or have left their own party. They're too extreme, or they've got into some sort of problem, or many become an independent for that reason. Or they're standing on a one-party thing. They're anti-Tesco's, or they're pro-the park. And then once they've got in, the anti-Tesco's party, then having got rid of Tesco's, a bit later they suddenly realise they all hate each other. Or that, actually within that there's a range of politics which can't live together. And so what we did was to get to, or to design what we called a way of working, which are effectively, I think, sort of common sense rules. They're sort of the way that a well-functioning family functions in many ways. And because of that, 4 years later, we're still there. We have no party whip. We've never badly fallen out. We've got radically different views within the group of 10 of us. But having that way of working has been the absolute key principle of it. It's based on a quote from a guy who I'll probably pronounce this wrong, but Pete Hine, I think, who said, "The noble art of losing face may one day save the human race." So what we're trying to say is that U-turns are good. We like U-turns, we like mistakes, and then learning from them, that actually being able to say, oh, okay, I didn't understand that, I'll do that differently, which you hear so rarely, is just, should become part of the culture of the way that politics works. I mean, incidentally, that quote was borrowed by Hans Blix, the guy who, the Iraqi weapons inspector, who basically said, if Blair and Bush had been able to do a U-turn, we would never have got into this mess. Anyway, so what we've done really is to run a vibrant, ambitious, non-party council that listens to people and works to engage so they can see real change. Because our theory is that as people see change, then they'll want more. And then as the council moves to a role of facilitating them to get involved, gradually we get to a situation where people take ownership with a council that's outward looking in a very different way. So that's what we've tried to do. We're just about to finish the first 3.5 years. Well, we're 3.5 years in. There's another few months until we have an election, and then the people of Frome will decide in May whether they want phase 2. And phase 2, I think is to really push that, trying to build a vibrant, active democracy much more. So really, further that, and in many ways, sort of cut further our links with what happens above, so that we're absolutely reliant on ourselves and not from others. And so this model's now being replicated. I know of about 10 towns and a couple of cities who've been having meetings. There were about 100 people met in Wells earlier this week. They're running now as WIN, good name, Wells Independence. Street Independence, Sin, and Glastonbury Independence are coming along, Sin and Gin, but, so basically, there's lots of potential on the naming front, but there are a number of places I've had a lot of conversations and some really, really interesting meetings now in places like Langport and Bath and Glastonbury, meeting with groups of people who are basically looking at their town councils and going, this is just so crap. There's got to be a better way to do it. And it doesn't have to be an enormous amount of time and energy and effort. And I think one can make a real difference in these ways. So that's really the story. I think what I'm saying to you is that change is not only essential, but it's possible. And it'll never come from above, where the vested interests are too great. I'm absolutely convinced that if we don't do it ourselves, it won't happen. And I also think it's almost impossible in Britain to do it in a sort of anarchic route. That again, the vested interests are so great that to sort of try and push the system out of the way, or to do it with black balaclavas on, won't work. So my theory of world domination is to rise up in this way from below. That's basically what I want to say to you, I think. My hope is that in these kinds of ways, the democratic system will become both unrecognizable and functional. Thank you very much. Whoa, not bad. 1 more minute. 1 minute. Hey, what happened to my other ones? Okay, 1 minute. Has anyone got a burning question? Go for it. I think primarily, a lot of it is structural within the council. A lot of it is trying to get a whole attitude within the council and within the people's attitude to the council, if that makes any sense. So it's just a much, much more positive way, so that people's instinctive answer as staff is yes rather than no. So they may be thinking, I've no idea how to do that, but it's sort of, they're instinctive, they're trying to help people to make things happen, and then get people to understand that that's what can happen for them too. I'll talk to you afterwards, if you like, and give you some better examples.
How are you talking to the people you represent, and how are they talking to you?
Not well enough. So that's very much phase 2, and there's people in the room and there's some really interesting and exciting books and work that's going on, I think, as to how we can do that better. But having a lot more public meetings. Our meetings now, where it used to be 2 men and a dog who came to meetings, the town meeting had 150 people at it. The secret is food and alcohol. But anyway, so that's part of it. But then I think it's so trying to put places. Actually, I started today listening to the Danish politician, and one of the things that he said was bringing fun back in, which is partly when going back to the beginning about my chain. Of course, it's taking a piss slightly or being a little bit offline, but it's trying to make people understand that actually it's all right to come and talk to people. So it's breaking down some of those barriers. We need to make more opportunities for that to happen. I definitely want to get into participatory budgeting if I'm re-elected, so that that's high up the agenda. And then I'm going to have to stop.
You increased the number of people who voted by 75%. How did you do that and how did you fund it?
Funding was, at this level, funding's virtually nothing. It doesn't cost you to stand. Yes, it doesn't cost you to, so 25 quid it cost me. So there's no great, that one, which went on the printing. So there's not a great deal of money that goes into these sort of things. And really just by making sure that there was somebody standing everywhere, and then by just upping the whole game and having a real presence and making, as I said, making it fun. We're Independence for Frome, which is which is another good name. If not now, when, Biff, all that kind of thing. So I highly recommend choosing a name which works as an acronym. That's my final top tip.